Hey, everybody. I'm going to dive right in today because there's quite a bit of data that I want to share with you. I just came across a report that was produced by PushPay. In the late 1990s, an average of 43% of adults attended church weekly. By 2009, nearly 48% of Americans worshiped weekly. However, in 2020, weekly attendance dropped to 29%. Now, we know what happened in 2020, and we know what churches were forced to do because those that couldn't gather within their church buildings had to find a way. So those that already had online services continue to produce weekend services online, and a lot of churches were forced to come up with online services so they could continue to reach people in their congregations. Now, this research that Barna Group and Aspen Group had done, I come across this part about in-person versus online, and the data was pretty telling. So they were asked, U.S. Christians were asked, for each of the following, do you think it is more meaningful in person or online? Listen to these results. When they were asked about building community, 68% said it's more meaningful in person, and 11% said it's more meaningful online. I think that's pretty telling. Discipleship, 66% said more meaningful in person, and only 10% said more meaningful online. Encouragement, 65% in person, 10% online. Worship, 65% in person, 9% online. Growing closer to God, 62% more meaningful in person, with 10% saying more meaningful online. Prayer, 62% versus 9% online. Learning from the sermon or message, 59% said it's more meaningful to be in person when they're learning from a sermon or message, with only 11% said it is more meaningful at home. Listening to the sermon or message, 57% said more meaningful in person, and only 12% said it's more meaningful online. I think there's a strong correlation with us pushing online services a lot more than we used to before 2020. Before 2020, we would have our weekend services. Sometime during the course of the week, we would upload our weekend service. Nowadays, we strive very hard to make sure that our online services are live so that people can enjoy them from the comfort of their home. The reality is, when people get to stay home, they're not nearly as engaged, they're not building community, they're not being discipled. There's not as much meaningfulness in listening to a sermon from their home than it is with a group of individuals that are gathering and worshiping God together. So is it possible that engagement then decreases over time? Absolutely. I think there's a strong correlation, and there's other ripple effects that has. I think as church leaders, we have to figure out, how do we leverage technology and online services to reach people? But at the end of the day, I think it's critical that we invite them back to our church buildings. We have to figure out how to get people to gather together on weekends. Now, should they continue to do other things to grow in their discipleship? Absolutely. But we've got to get them back on the weekends. So I appreciate you listening today. I'm actually going to take this section and do another post on it because there's a lot of cool information about atmosphere as well as the building itself that I want to share with you too. Thanks for listening.